Because of his incessant personal attacks against the media, President Donald Trump is often compared with President Richard Nixon. However, he is rarely compared with President Nixon in the domain of foreign policy. That's unfortunate. If there is one legacy from President Nixon of which today's Republicans can be proud, it is Nixon's 10 Commandments of statecraft. And those 10 Commandments are highly relevant in respect of a big decision President Trump has to make, whether to renew or scupper the Iran nuclear deal. So the question is, what lessons can the 45th president learn from the 37th president? The answer is to think about and apply Nixon's 10 Commandments of statecraft. Let's start with the two Nixonian commandments to which Mr. Trump has remained faithful. The fifth commandment: never give up unilaterally what could be used as a bargaining chip. Mr. Trump's pretty good at that. He's not given up anything to Iran, nor to the P5+1. President Nixon said, never let your adversary underestimate what you would do. Never tell your adversary what you would do. Well, Mr. Trump is pretty good at keeping that commandment too. He sure keeps them guessing in Tehran and Qom as to what he might or might not do.
It was a terrible deal. It should have never, ever been made. We could have made a good deal or a reasonable deal.
Now let's turn to the 8 commandments of statecraft that President Nixon laid out, against which Mr. Trump sins. The first commandment: always be prepared to negotiate and never negotiate without being prepared. Mr. Trump, unfortunately, is not prepared on the 159-page Iran nuclear deal. That deal, the facts in those 159 pages show that the deal works to postpone the breakout time, the time Iran needs to build a nuke, to beyond 1 year. And that's the purpose of the deal. The second Nixonian commandment is never be belligerent, but always be firm. Nixon understood the difference between being belligerent and being firm. Unfortunately, grievous Twitter storms are the daily hallmark of President Trump's diplomacy. And in the wake of these Twitter storms is anger from Iran. President Nixon's third commandment of statecraft is that terms of a deal should be openly agreed to, but privately negotiated. He negotiates terms of a deal openly in a grandstanding way that alienates the other side, in this case, Iran. The fourth commandment is never to seek publicity that would destroy the ability to get results. Here, Mr. Trump's narcissistic populism gets the better of it. Sometimes it is to be used wisely in a dignified way, but other times its use can again alienate the opponent, and that happens consistently with respect to Iran. President Nixon's seventh commandment of statecraft is always leave your adversary a face-saving line of retreat. In fact, President Nixon counseled that it's best to build a golden bridge of escape for your enemies. However, Mr. Trump is burning all possible bridges that Iran might take. The most golden of them would be a bright economic future for Iran, safe through, for example, membership in the WTO. However, Mr. Trump would like to see this proud Persian civilization isolated from the global economy. The eighth Nixonian commandment of statecraft: always carefully distinguish between friends who provide some human rights and enemies who deny all human rights. Human rights seem to play no role in Mr. Trump's decision-making about whether to renew the Iran nuclear deal or indeed in general in Middle East policy. The 9th commandment of President Nixon and statecraft: always do at least as much for our friends as our enemies do for their friends. It's easy to make the case that President Trump isn't good to his friends. Look at what's happened with respect to Canada, Mexico, the European Union, Australia, and Brazil with respect to the trade war over steel and aluminum. There's another example, however, and that's Israel. Yes, Israel. Mr. Trump is not the friend of Israel that he is made out to be. Friends tell friends uncomfortable truths, and the uncomfortable truth is that the Iran-lied presentation made by the Israeli Prime Minister was an easily rebutted tragicomedy. The point is, it is no act of friendship to Israel to facilitate diminution of trust in the credibility and judgment of Israel. Finally, the 10th commandment: never lose faith. Mr. Nixon believed in the superiority in theory and practice of American democracy over Soviet communism. But the fairer point is that the president has no faith in IAEA inspectors. He has no faith in the dispute resolution mechanism of the Iran nuclear deal. And he has no faith in the future possibilities that might emerge from the deal. For example, using this deal to build 2 new deals, one on ballistic missiles and one on regional peace and stability. The Old Testament book of Exodus teaches that the 10 commandments were written with the finger of God. God has big hands. Mr. Trump might do well to size up at least to that of Mr. Nixon. No deal gives Iran radical freedom to build a nuke. If that happens, the relevant biblical analogy might be in the book of Revelations about Armageddon.